community radio stations, on public access TV and PBS TV stations, and both TV satellite networks, on Dish Network Channel 9415 Free Speech TV, 9410 Link TV, and on DirecTV Channel 375. And we're video and audio podcasting at democracynow.org. Our headlines are also available in Spanish for any radio station to take, as over 180 are, and our headlines are available in Spanish in transcript form at democracynow.org. Well, today we're joined by best-selling Chilean writer Isabel Allende. She's the world-renowned writer known for her narrative craft, gripping stories that blend the mythical with the personal. She's written over a dozen books that have sold 51 million copies. Isabel Allende was born in Peru in 1942 and traveled the world as the daughter of a prominent Chilean family. Her father was the Chilean ambassador to Peru, her uncle Salvador Allende, Chile's president between 1970 and 1973. He died on another September 11th. That's September 11th, 1973, when Augusto Pinochet seized power in a CIA-backed military coup. Isabel Allende's family then fled to Venezuela, where she continued to work as a journalist. Her debut novel in 1982, The House of the Spirits, chronicled 4 generations of a Chilean family through the tumult of that country's political history. It's a history that's intertwined with Allende's own. Her latest book, her 16th, is a memoir. It's called The Sum of Our Days. It continues from where her most famous novel, Paula, left off. I'm joined right now by Isabel Allende. She's here in the Firehouse studio in New York. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you for having me, Amy.
It's wonderful to have you with us, although I have to say I felt guilty having you in today, because in your book, The Sum of Our Days, which is a beautiful look at your life, at your family's life after the death of your daughter, you talk about, I don't want to use the word torture, but the pain of being separated from your family, your friends, your extended community when you have to go on these book tours around the country and around the world.
It's part of the job, and I do it, you know, getting there is the difficult thing, but once I am here talking with you, it's great.
Well, this book picks up where Paula left off, a very painful story of your daughter. Why don't you talk about what happened to Paula?
Paula had a rare condition called porphyria that runs in her father's family. So my son also has it, and 2 of my granddaughters. And actually, it should not be fatal today. There's enough technology and knowledge today to prevent it and to cure it. And Paula had a crisis, unfortunately, in Spain at a moment when the hospital was on strike. Just a series of bad coincidences. They gave her the wrong medication. She fell in a coma. They didn't monitor the coma. There was negligence, but nobody's fault. Things happen, you know. And the worst part was that the hospital covered up that Paula had severe brain damage. She was in a vegetative state for 5 months, until finally they gave me back my daughter like a newborn baby. And I brought her to California, to our house, where she died a year later.
Your book begins at that moment with, in a sense, slowly you regaining your life. Talk about that process.
During the time that she was in a coma, I was at her bedside holding her hand, impotent. There's nothing I could do. And then this book, The Sum of Our Days, starts when we scattered her ashes in a forest in West Marin, where I live, in California. And from that moment on, many things changed for me and the family. I had to live without Paula, and I wrote a book, and in the process of writing the book, I sort of understood what had happened. I accepted it. I could limit the pain, the grief, and by putting it in the page, by telling it, I could deal with it. And that's the story of my life, Amy. If I can write it, I can cope. And I've been writing many books, but in every book I try to explore something in my own soul that I need to solve, I need to understand. And maybe that's why I wrote The House of the Spirits. It was such a time of terror and upheaval and confusion in Chile. I couldn't understand what had happened. I lived in a country that I thought was the most solid and longest democracy in Latin America. And all of a sudden, it became a place where there was torture and concentration camps, and people were doing horrible things to each other. And in order to understand that, I needed to write a book. And now I know that it can happen everywhere.
Talk about writing House of the Spirits, and then we'll come forward. How you did that. That was your first book. Your name is world-renowned now. But then, you didn't think that book would ever see the light of day.
No, I was a political refugee living in Venezuela. I had a job that was 12 hours a day, no money. It was a hard time. But I had the story inside and I really needed to tell it. And with the excuse of my grandfather's death, I started writing at home in the kitchen. Salud. Writing in the kitchen at night, and then I had 500 pages, very dirty manuscript with soup and coffee stains. And then at the end of the year, I had this thing that didn't look like a letter from my grandfather. It looked like something else, but I didn't know what it was. It was a lucky book. I found an agent, the book was published, it was an immediate success.
Where did you send it to?
I sent it by mail to Barcelona. I didn't know the agent, and she took the book and she said to me, this is a good book, but everybody can write a first good book because it's the story of their lives. It's the second book that proves the writer. So while the book was being published in Europe, I started writing a second one, which also deals with the same theme of dictatorship and torture and death.
And that book was?
Of Love and Shadows. They made a movie of that one too, with Antonio Banderas, by the way. Oh my God, Antonio Banderas.
That book about a young journalist and about what happens to her, her being shot and trying to uncover a massacre.
Yes, that story is based on a couple I knew. It's not my story, but those stories were very, very common in Latin America at the time. Half of Latin America was living under some kind of dictatorship, military dictatorship. Most of them supported by the CIA, by the way. And so this was, I didn't even mention the country because it was so common. It could have happened in Nicaragua, in Uruguay, in Argentina, anywhere.
And so how did it feel to come to live in this country? As you said, the country that supported those dictatorships, that supported, well, Pinochet and the death of, on September 11, 1973, of your uncle, Salvador Allende. He died as a result of that coup.
I never thought that I would come to live in the United States. I was not pursuing the American dream. I didn't know what that was. But I was passing by on a book tour, fell in lust with a guy, and decided to spend a week with him to get it out of my system. That was 20 years ago. I'm still with the same guy. I have become an American citizen, and I love this country. I think that this country has incredible potential for goodness, an incredible possibility for doing the wrong thing, too. So being an American citizen, being able to vote, gives me some little power. And the fact that I'm talking with you, that I have a public life, I feel that, that I can be influential, even if it's in a very little measure. But I want to change things, and I think that that's what we are all trying to do.
Isabel Allende, your book is a memoir, a look at this family that you've gathered around you, part of it, in Northern California, in Marin. Describe the family compound, if you can call it that.
We have an emotional compound. We live within a few blocks of each other. We cook for everybody. We raise the children together. And this is not a blood-related family, except for my son and my grandchildren. The rest we've put together with Americans, and mostly Americans, people who have chosen to belong to this little tribe, which is different than having the real family. I don't know how your family works, Amy, but if I lived in Chile with my family, it would be horrible. I just don't like those people. Very conservative, very Catholic. I don't like them. But this little tribe that I have here, we've chosen to be together. So it works perfectly.
How does it work?
It works with humor, with tolerance, with acceptance, with responsibility that each one assumes, and a lot of privileges that each one of us has because we belong there. It's giving and taking. It's not just taking.
Tell us about the Sisters of Perpetual Disorder.
I have a little prayer group. We call it prayer group, although we pray very little. We mostly talk. And it's 6 women that we get together on Tuesdays, and we witness each other's lives. We help each other, but it's not therapy. We meditate, and we are always in touch through the email. I had the feeling that I belonged in the United States when I met these women, and I found this sisterhood. I think that every woman in the world should have a circle of women. It's very empowering.
Speaking of women, and going back to Chile, Michelle Bachelet, the new